Before the invention of the railways, the world was a very much larger place. Scorched deserts, dense jungles, and vast, impenetrable frozen tundra trapped the planet's populations and left travel and trade to only the bravest of adventurers. But trains have opened up these final frontiers, enabling us all to cross even the most deadly of wildernesses, penetrating places once thought impossible to reach. But conquering the world's wildernesses poses uniquely difficult challenges for even the most pioneering of railway engineers.
As you can see here, the landscape is, we are alone here.
We get sometimes very high winds from the southwest, and they can blow up to 200 kilometers an hour.
And you can just see how soft the ground is underfoot. This ground can hardly support my weight.
And it's one such seemingly impossible challenge that faced the intrepid Californian railroaders in the early 1900s. At the turn of the 20th century, the thriving coastal city of San Diego wanted to run a railroad link to the east. But in its path was a desert wilderness, filled with so many lethal obstructions that everyone said it simply couldn't be done. But one man thought otherwise. Deep in the Californian wilderness, engineer Dan Dickrell is riding the rails on board a specially adapted truck. Following a route once dubbed the Impossible Railroad, to discover a truly extraordinary feat of engineering.
Right now we're about 85 miles outside of San Diego, and the terrain outside is as wild as it gets. But where we're headed to this morning is well worth this difficult journey.
In 1906, San Diego entrepreneur John D. Spreckles decided he could defy the odds and build a railroad to transform the city's fortunes. Stretching from the coast to the city of El Centro in southeastern California, it would span an astonishing 238 kilometers across an inhospitable landscape.
Conditions out here are extreme. Temperatures ranging from well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit to well below freezing. There's landslides, earthquakes, floods, the list goes on.
Many thought these massive wilderness challenges would defeat the engineers. And even for Dan and the maintenance crew in a modern high-rail truck, it doesn't take long to discover how the Impossible Railroad earned its reputation.
Working my way ahead of you and
just right there and then work
just
your
clear,
way back.
clear. All right, I gotcha. How often do you have to do this?
You know, it depends on the wind.
Yeah.
A lot of times we'll come here and it'll be full from there all the way to the other end.
The fact that we're not too far outside of civilization and we're already clearing debris of the tracks is a pretty good indication of how interesting things are going to get here quite quickly.
But drifting sand was only the start of the challenges facing the engineers of this desert railroad. As the track rises through the Anza Borrego Desert State Park, this scorched terrain throws up yet more issues.
It's always a big problem here with falling rocks, rock slides, landslides. There's a lot of instability. It's always a challenge to keep the line open.
You throw around the word impossible, but then when you get up into this terrain and see just how steep and rocky and effectively alien it all is, it is truly impossible. And the fact that it's here, though, meant somebody got it done.
And during its 12-year construction, the Impossible Railroad's biggest hurdle of all was the 18-kilometer-long Carrizo Gorge.
We reached the end of the line for our truck.
A brutal environment that still plays havoc today.
There's one huge obstacle in our way. This landslide, we're gonna have to scramble over, crawl through the tunnel, and emerge on the other side to get where we want to go. Oh, this is my kind of fun now.
In the face of this unforgiving landscape, it seemed the railway's engineers would never succeed. But what Dan is desperate to see is their monumental solution which finally beat nature into submission.
This is the Goat Canyon Trestle. A properly breathtaking engineering marvel. I truly love this structure. Its beauty, its majesty, it's magnificent.
Over 55 meters tall and spanning nearly 200 meters, the Goat Canyon Trestle is widely regarded as the world's largest curved wooden trestle. Incredibly, it was built in little over 100 days, following yet another of the Impossible Railroad's natural disasters. Before its construction, a train passage through Goat Canyon was along a precarious ledge and through a nearby tunnel. But this route didn't last.
Just ahead we can see Tunnel 15. When a huge landslide broke loose, it partially collapsed the interior of the tunnel, but also dislodged the portal itself, sliding it down the mountain, causing irreparable damage.
The closure of Tunnel 15 was potentially fatal for the project. But with so much money already invested in its success, a bold decision was made. Bridge Goat Canyon to reopen the line. But to build, engineers had the challenge of transporting materials to this remote, craggy location. Anything heavy would be impractical, so they opted for wood. This was a perfect lightweight solution. But with desert temperatures reaching up to 50 degrees Celsius, any crossing train could spark yet another problem: fire.
Now, engineers came up with a very innovative solution. Up there's a water tank, and you can see the pipe that comes down and connects to a series of valves and hoses at various levels underneath the trestle.
Manually operated by a caretaker stationed at the canyon, the gravity-fed sprinkler system would be activated prior to a train crossing the Goat Canyon Trestle.
So here we can see remnants of the old sprinkler system. Water stored in the tank is gravity-fed down through pipes, which you can see extends all the way behind me down the trestle. When the caretaker opens the master valve, the water is distributed through valves and sprinkler heads that dampens the entire structure, preventing a catastrophic fire. It's brilliant.
But the demands of carrying trains over 73 tons across the lengthy wooden trestle posed yet more construction challenges. Nailing the trestle's timbers together simply wasn't an option.
Imagine a train passing overhead. The weight of the train, its heavy load, would cause a significant amount of vibration. If the wooden structure was nailed together, it'd be extremely rigid, ultimately shaking itself apart and removing the nails almost entirely.
Instead, engineers bolted nearly 50 kilometers worth of timber together, forming a semi-rigid structure that allowed any vibrations to pass safely through the trestles into the ground below.
It may seem like a small thing, but the use of bolted fasteners is a big reason why this structure is still standing today.
The Goat Canyon Trestle allowed passengers and freight to safely cross the Carrizo Gorge for decades. In an extreme wilderness, this engineering marvel undoubtedly played its part in keeping this ambitious line open. Until, having survived all nature could throw at it, in 2008 this section of the line was finally closed. But now there are plans to reopen it once more.
Today, hope remains that once again this rail line can carry freight across this unforgiving landscape, giving new life to the impossible railway. Whether those plans succeed or not, the Goat Canyon Trestle remains a monument to human effort, endeavor, and engineering.
They're the railways that tackle the great wildernesses. Trains traversing the world's toughest terrain, posing engineers with seemingly impossible problems, requiring innovative solutions to complete their remarkable journeys. Many wilderness railways cross vast flat terrain, but when they have to go up, it's a whole new world. Nothing grows, practically nothing can survive. So getting a railway to the top of a mountain is a tall order. Whew. At over 3,000 meters, the steep climbs up the sheer cliffs of the Bernese highlands in the Swiss Alps are only accessible to mountaineers. You only have to look at this lofty wilderness to appreciate it's the last place you choose to build a railway. However, in the late 19th century, one intrepid train engineer not only took on this unforgiving terrain, he chose to build a railway up through 3 of its most extreme and iconic mountains.
Here we are, standing in front of the famous 3 mountains. The Eiger on the left, the Mönch and the Jungfrau. All 3 of them roughly about 4,000 meters high.
These 3 mighty summits have fascinated poets and artists for hundreds of years. But at the turn of the century, the majestic mountains also started to work their magic on the general public. As interest grew, entrepreneur Adolf Geyer-Zeller was determined to build a railway to bring these mighty mountains to the masses.
People want to see the mountain, and Adolf Geyer-Zeller, he was the man who had the idea to build this railway. He wanted to build the level to the top of the Jungfrau.
His remarkable achievement is the Jungfrau Railway. A railway that climbs 1,400 meters through a vicious wilderness of rock, ice and snow. The end of the line, Europe's highest station. Train controller Christopher Southall knows all too well the challenges of building a railway here.
The weather can change within seconds, really. It can be from a summer 25 degrees here to a winter of minus 25, with extreme weather, high winds, thunderstorms, snowstorms, snow drifting. Today, we're lucky.
Instead of taking the weather on, Geyer-Zeller's audacious solution was to avoid it altogether. He decided to build a train that could climb the inside of a mountain. From the Kleiner Scheidegg base station at 2,000 meters, the initial 2-kilometer route is above ground. But incredibly, Geyer-Zeller then chose to dig and blast 7 kilometers of tunnels through the mighty Eiger, Mönch and Jungfrau mountains.
This was very difficult and very dangerous, you know. There was about 300 employers and 30 people died.
But, as tour guide Roland Fontenive is about to find out, although building a railway inside a mountain avoids the weather, it creates yet another seemingly impossible problem.
Now we go up to Jungfrau, top of Europe, by the Jungfrau railways.
Geyer-Zeller was operating in a golden age of steam. But coal-powered trains and long underground journeys aren't a good mix.
You cannot go with a steam train 7.3 kilometers in a tunnel, you know. Then in the top, everybody will be black, black face. The only option was to go by electric.
But when you're slap bang in the middle of a wilderness, 3.5 kilometers above sea level, finding an electric supply for your train seems an impossible challenge. However, Gajazella turned the wilderness to his advantage, creating another extraordinary solution.
He need to build hydroelectric power station before they can build the railway.
Gajazella built his very own hydro power plant, 15 kilometers from the railway, providing a dedicated and ready supply of electricity.
The technique, it's more than 100 years old, so we have brand new generators, but it's the same systems like at the start at producing electricity.
Fed from a local river, the power is generated by funneling its water down a whopping 160-meter drop.
This one is from an old generator, and the water from the river is falling like this, and then the wheel is turning, and so with this type we are producing electricity.
Over 4,000 litres of water per second flow through these wheels, feeding energy into the generator above.
As we said, in the upper part is the generator, and here you can see the high voltage cables. So in these cables are 6,000 volts, so we can touch them and it feels pretty warm, so that's the electricity we feel at these cables.
Going uphill, of course, it's just the power of the motors and the electricity getting the train up to the top. But coming down, the motor actually works as a generator, and it's actually generating electricity. 80% is reserved for its braking power, but the last 20% is actually put back up into the power cables. So in theory, you could say 5 trains down and we send up 1 train for free.
Electric motors drive a rack and pinion system that pulls around 5,000 passengers a day up the steep 35-minute climb.
Now we're coming up to the tunnel.
No matter what the weather.
When we go up in the winter, we didn't have to push the snow away, you know. It's always free, you know. And so you can go up 365 days in the year. I think that time their only choice was to build the tunnel.
During its construction, this hugely ambitious railway's costs doubled. But the industrious Gajazella had forward planned for a shortfall. Partway up his tunnel, he created a station and viewing platform known as Icemere, or Sea of Ice. As his workers continued to dig to the top of the mountain, trains would bring paying guests to this midpoint to marvel at Icemere's beautiful vistas, raising valuable revenue.
Wow, good. In the beginning, they had some mountain guides. They go hiking with the guests, so you could go outside. I think it's very nice view. You can see in the ice, in the crevasse, you see the crevasse of the glacier.
Today, this is no longer the end of the line for Roland and his fellow passengers. The impossible railway has one more mighty climb to tackle. All this work can create wear and tear that could see the crucial rack and pinion fail.
Here we have one of our drivers lubricating one of the trains.
To ensure nothing is damaged, engineers have developed a special oiling system.
These 2 tanks is about 10 litres of oil, and that will be enough for about 1,000 kilometres of this train to go up and down.
Every 50 seconds, the rack and cog are automatically sprayed with an 8-second burst of oil.
It not only lubricates the rack and pinion, the cog, but it also lubricates the wheels, so the track will also have less wear and tear. It is very essential that these trains are lubricated and this oil system works due to the possibility of a derailment, which, of course, no train company wants to have.
brilliant engineering ensures the Jungfrau Railway reaches the end of the line, 3.5 kilometers above sea level. Its passengers confronted with a viewpoint that would have been impossible to reach, but for the toughest mountaineers.
Wow. Right now we are on 3,571 meters. Yeah, the view is perfect. When people see the view, most people they start to cry. What can I say? Before, only by foot you can come up here. This was something special for people.
It's a view Adolf Geyer-Zeller would never enjoy. He may have died before its completion, but his impossible railway has conquered this great wilderness.
Today, if someone said to build a train through these mountains, you would think they're crazy. But this happened. 105 years ago, they completed it. It happened.
The mountains may pose engineers multiple problems, but the world's railways must cross many diverse landscapes. And one presents an altogether different wilderness challenge: the jungle.
I love the way people just jump in front of the train for a quick photo opportunity.
British travellers Matthew Bell and Philip Holmes are joining the thousands of international tourists each year that journey to the Kanchanaburi region of Thailand.
They don't care about getting on the tracks, do they? They're not shy about it.
All of them drawn to a unique wilderness railway.
That wouldn't happen on the tube. A child standing on the track.
Around 3 trains a day make the 2-hour journey from Kanchanaburi station to Nam Tok and the waterfalls of the Sayok Noi National Park. It's a popular trip.
Come on then. Back we go.
Can we go here?
It's broken.
It's broken. Oh, thanks anyway.
But this is a railway previously thought impossible. Since the 19th century, a wilderness railroad had been considered between Burma and Thailand, but was thought too difficult and dangerous because of the many rivers and hilly, dense jungle. But the middle of the 20th century brought a new world order. In 1942, the armies of Japan captured the British colony of Singapore, enslaving tens of thousands of Allied troops, including an injured 23-year-old gunner, Fergus Ancorn.
The Japanese came into the hospital. They were smashing down the cabinets and taking out the drugs. Then they went out with the walking wounded. And I said to the man lying on the stretcher beside me, "What's going on? What are they doing with them?" He said, "They're taking them onto the front lawn and killing them."
Despite his injuries, Fergus's life was spared. He and around 60,000 other Allied prisoners of war were eventually sent to build what is now a major tourist attraction, the Thai-Burma Railway, and the infamous bridge over the River Kwai.
I mean, you've seen the film, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I hear that, you know, that doesn't even come close to the terrible conditions that these people suffered.
By using a workforce of prisoners of war and Asian laborers, the Japanese military had decided they could build this impossible jungle line and use it as a supply route for their armies. It was a decision that would eventually see it dubbed the Death Railway.
The working day, up at dawn, handful of rice to eat, working 18 hours, 30 degrees of sun, Within 2 weeks, we didn't know the days of the week. In the jungle, of course, it was virgin jungle. No one had ever been there. And we had no contact with anybody. And I used to think, I wonder if the war's over. Who won? Are we going to die as slaves?
Wilderness railways. Feats of engineering. Tackling impossible challenges thrown up by the planet's most inhospitable landscapes.
This is the most amazing view in Europe.
But one wilderness railway had to contend with far more than Mother Nature. During the Second World War, the Japanese military brutally used thousands of Asian laborers and prisoners of war to construct a 400-kilometer-long rail line through a dense jungle landscape connecting Thailand and Burma. On the cliffs beside the Kwai Noi River, Gunner Fergus Ancoyne and his fellow POWs would be made to build one of the most extraordinary and iconic engineering features on the line. The Wampo Viaduct.
Well, the Wampo Viaduct was an immense affair. It was nearly a mile, I think, and it's round the side of a mountain, about 100 feet up. So we had to blast the mountain away with the dynamite. Very, very dangerous. It was the only job I was on where we had to have elephants to help us.
Today, hordes of tourists, including British travellers Matthew Bell and Philip Holmes, make the precarious journey to experience this seemingly impossible railway.
Fairly vertigo-inducing, actually.
Constructed mainly by hand, the prisoners of war built a teak and concrete trestle that clings to a ledge between the cliffs and the river below. But this was engineering the prisoners were hoping was not built to last.
Apparently, the prisoners of war tried to sabotage the building of the bridge by collecting termites and putting them into the woodwork frame of the original bridge.
That's a bit of a, what do you call a long-term plan?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
We assembled it, and on every joint we put a handful of termites in every joint, hoping they would eat the bridge when we'd gone. I found out later that they don't like teak. It's hard, they can't do it, so they're still there.
Do you know what? Could you imagine being in that situation then? You had no idea how long the war was going to go on for.
Yeah, well, you probably got to do something to keep your spirits alive.
It has been recorded that 2 shifts of 1,000 men each worked day and night continuously, completing the Wampo Viaduct in just 17 days.
But I guess, you know, that was the Japanese philosophy on life was, especially around that time, was really different. The Japanese wanted the job done. They wanted to win the war.
Despite mass malnutrition, dysentery and malaria amongst the POWs and the thousands of enslaved Asian workers, the entire railway, with nearly 700 bridges and viaducts, was completed in less than a year, but at an estimated cost of over 100,000 lives.
It's just so sad. It's just so tragic. How could you stand up and be counted? It's like, it's just so anonymous. Yeah. It's just one of the many number of people who died. I just think it's tragic.
After the war, most of the Wilderness Railway was soon reclaimed by the jungle. What remains is a tribute to the workers like Fergus who survived the so-called Death Railway, and many thousands who didn't.
I don't ever remember saying we made a good job of that. You just did what you were told. I mean, Wampo viaduct, imagine building that by hand. So we did a good job. It always beats me how the Japanese, who spoke no English, and the English, who spoke no Japanese, built a thing like that viaduct.
Whether crossing jungle, deserts or mountains, the challenges facing a wilderness railway are often apparent. But sometimes, hidden problems lie beneath the surface. For rail engineers, nature's obstacles are normally plain to see. They can go through them, under them, or over them. But sometimes the challenges can take you by surprise. The West Highlands of Scotland, a beautiful wilderness enjoyed by millions of visitors every year. But in the late 1800s, this wild terrain filled train engineers with trepidation.
Back in the 1880s, when people were building railways all over Britain, Scotland didn't have that many railways. And the rich fishing grounds of the west coast of Scotland meant that it was absolutely imperative to try and get a railway built down to Glasgow.
Linking the rich pickings of the Atlantic to the rest of Britain would require an audacious railway solution. The West Highland Line. Stretching 198 kilometres from Glasgow to the Highlands Fort William, the Wilderness Line traverses dense forests and extreme mountains, landscape to challenge any rail engineer. But what makes this an impossible railway is perhaps the route's most innocuous scenery, Rannoch Moor.
I never get tired of this moor. I never get tired of the views to the mountains in the background, the small plantations of fir trees.
It may be flat, open terrain, but the 130 square kilometre moor presented a potentially devastating problem for the railway's engineers, as historian Doug Carmichael is about to find out when he follows in their footsteps.
I'm not quite sure we're going to get across this.
Rannoch Moor is essentially one giant bog.
You can just see how soft the ground is underfoot here. On face value, building a railway through here looked like an impossible task. This ground can hardly support my weight, so you can imagine the challenge there was for the engineers to put a railway over it.
With an unstable track, the railway's plans were sinking fast. Engineer Charles Foreman was amongst those who solved this vexing wilderness problem.
The idea was he would use the resources around him. First of all, he took large quantities of this brushwood and laid it on the bogs. Then he took even larger quantities of branches and timber, and then he took turf from all over the moor and laid that on top of the brushwood.
Foreman then topped his natural sandwich with aggregate.
And we get all the aggregate out, and we put it on, and finally I'm going to prove that it works. And it works. The railway did not sink anymore.
Constructed over 5 years with a peak workforce of 5,000, spanning Rannoch Moor's 37-kilometre stretch was perhaps the West Highlands' most hard-won achievement.
I can't imagine what it must have been like all those years ago to build a railway through an environment like this. Quite an incredible achievement.
One area of the boggy moor, however, would need much more than sticks and stones.
They got to here and they found that there was a 1,000-foot wide depression, so they decided they would have to build a viaduct. They had to dig down through yards and yards till they finally hit boulder clay, and they were able to erect these towers. And eventually a 9-span viaduct took shape.
208 metres long, Rannoch Viaduct is the second longest span on the West Highland Line. Beaten only by its most famous crossing, the magical Glenfinnan Viaduct, that has captured the imagination of train enthusiasts and film buffs alike.
The West Highland Line breathed life into remote communities, and more importantly still, tourism came to the West Highlands.
Thanks to inspired solutions, this impossible railway has opened up Scotland's wildest lands. Wilderness, home to some of the most extreme railways on the planet. Built by innovators taking on colossal challenges. From uncharted territory to subsiding soil. Engineers are an ingenious bunch, but there's one thing that can outwit them. As railways continue to reach further and further into the wilds, engineers have learned to adapt to virtually any situation. But one thing's out of their hands: the weather. And in an isolated wilderness, that can be a massive problem.
Help!
Norway, home to a vast frozen wilderness where winters are some of the harshest on the planet. With some areas engulfed by snow for up to 5 months of the year, it's no wonder this is one of Europe's most sparsely populated regions. As project manager Carl Morten Undal is all too aware.
As you can see here, the landscape is, we are alone here. It's about 15 kilometers to the nearest station where people are living, so we are totally alone up here.
This remote Norwegian environment receives huge snowfalls, creating drifts 3 meters deep. Yet, unbelievably, it is home to Northern Europe's highest rail route. The Bergen Railway.
We have a railroad crossing through one of the most beautiful parts of Norway. So I love my work.
During the 1800s, the only way to travel between the major cities of Oslo and Bergen was a week-long voyage by ship. But in 1909, they were connected by this ambitious railway. Travelling east to west, the line first passes through pasture land, but on reaching Geilo, it climbs 1,000 metres in just 100 kilometres, as this railway enters the Hardangervidda mountain range.
Compared to other railways, I think it's extremely challenging when they did that more than 100 years ago.
But former railway engineer Inga Hjortas is under no illusion. Keeping the railroad open is an even bigger undertaking.
In a bad winter, we can expect 4.5 meters of snow. You have to be good prepared to stay alive here in the winter.
At 1,250 meters, Sander, a snow-swept plateau, was once the most notorious section of this wilderness railroad.
This section of the line was the worst when it comes to snow problems. We have to clear the snow 24/7.
Now, this section of the railway has been beaten into submission by relentless Mother Nature.
So we had no choice. We had to abandon this track.
Just over 10 kilometres away, Carl and his team must somehow protect the operational line over a 30-kilometre weather-beaten stretch.
On the rest over here, we're going to build around 60, 70 meters this way.
Okay.
To catch some of the water coming down from the mountain.
The snow together with the wind will fill up this railroad on just 20, 30 minutes on a rough winter day.
Ensuring the impossible railway remains open calls for an inspired solution.
That's not enough time to us to keep the line open with the snowblower. So we need to also have the snow shed protection.
Around 12 kilometres of snow sheds cover the track, keeping up to 7-metre snowdrifts at bay. But many have been in place for over 50 years.
We're now walking in to the old snow sheds built up in a wooden structure with aluminium plates outside. And some of them are actually now in really bad shape. In the summertime we had water problem here, in the wintertime icing. And of course that is not very good for the wooden part here. As we can see, it's rotten.
To keep the railway running, Carl and his team are currently modernising these ageing weather defences.
Now we're building up a new one with steel and the steel plates also outside. Steel will come up on this concrete wall here. In the winter time, tons of snow will pressure on this wall and we need to secure it safely. Without snow shed protection in this area, it will be a very big challenge for us to keep the railway open.
But even snow sheds couldn't save the section of the now desolate Sander Plateau. Avoiding the weather here calls for a monumental construction project. An audacious £46 million 10-kilometre tunnel cut directly through a solid granite mountain.
It was opened in 1993 after 3 years of work. And it has made the line much more reliable, and it has reduced snow clearing costs with about 50%. So in around 13 years, this tunnel paid itself.
This engineering success story is just another chapter in the extraordinary history of a truly pioneering cross-country railway.
The Oslo-Bergen line was really a revolution. The line has been very important for more than 100 years.
This line is a lifeline for support the western part of Norway. I would say this is one of the most incredible railways in the world, Bergen Line.
Since the 1800s, wilderness railways have forged seemingly impossible paths through the world's most unforgiving landscapes. Through stunning achievements.
Almost from the very start of this project, people were calling it the impossible railroad.
This is an incredible wilderness railway. I take my cap off to the engineers who built it.
And groundbreaking innovations.
They're not ordinary trains at all. Basically, these trains were built for that terrain, a 25% gradient.
Engineers continue to defy the odds, creating impossible railways.
It doesn't matter about the weather when you get here. The train journey up is just the most amazing. One of the top 10 in the whole world for sure.